In the fall of 1993, a quiet backroom war erupted over the most prestigious prize in professional wrestling. The iconic Big Gold Belt, a symbol of wrestling royalty, found itself at the heart of a bitter legal dispute. You see, World Championship Wrestling, or WCW, was secretly getting ready to cut ties with the National Wrestling Alliance, the very organization that gave WCW's main championship its name. This wasn't some scripted storyline for TV. This was a real-life corporate divorce that would demote a once great empire to a historical footnote and change wrestling forever. This is the story of the day WCW left the NWA for dead. Before WWE, before the Monday Night Wars, wrestling was ruled by the National Wrestling Alliance. But the NWA, founded in 1948, wasn't a single company. Think of it more like a governing body, a coalition of independent promoters who each controlled their own territory. From Florida to Toronto, from the Carolinas to California, these promoters agreed to a simple set of rules. Don't run shows in my backyard, and I won't run them in yours. And most importantly, they all recognized one NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. This champion was the traveling king of the sport. He'd journey from territory to territory, defending the belt against the local hero in huge, sold-out main events. Who got to be that champion? That was decided by the NWA Board of Directors, a group made up of all those powerful promoters. For decades, this system made legends out of men like Lou Thez, Harley Race, Terry Funk, and Dusty Rhodes. It created a shared universe that made wrestling feel bigger and more legitimate than any one promotion could be on its own. But the territory system was a fragile coalition, and its power had started to crack long before 1993. The first major blow came around 1983. The WWF, which had long operated in the Northeast and had already distanced itself from the NWA's authority, began an aggressive national expansion. Vince McMahon, armed with cable TV deals and a vision for sports entertainment, started poaching stars and running shows in rival territories, dismantling the very system the NWA was built to protect. By the late 80s, the old NWA territories were dropping like flies. As the territories vanished, one NWA member stood as the last real bastion of the old guard, Jim Crockett Promotions. Based in the Mid-Atlantic, JCP was the NWA's powerhouse. It was home to Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, and its crown jewel, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. For much of the 80s, Flair was the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, synonymous with the title, and the brand new, dazzling, big gold belt created to represent it in 1986. In a desperate attempt to fight the WWF, Jim Crockett Jr. tried to beat McMahon at his own game. He started buying up the remaining territories to create a single, national promotion under the NWA banner. The ambition was huge, but so was the cost. By 1988, even though many fans felt JCP had a better in-ring product, the company was bleeding money and on the verge of collapse. That's when Ted Turner stepped in. The media mogul's TBS Superstation was the home of Crockett's TV show, World Championship Wrestling. Seeing an opportunity, Turner bought the whole operation, the wrestlers, the TV time, everything. He rebranded it as World Championship Wrestling, WCW. And with Turner's billions, it was no longer just a wrestling promotion. It was a corporate division. It inherited Crockett's spot as the NWA's flagship member and control over its world title. On paper, WCW was carrying the NWA's torch. In reality, the clock had just started ticking on their relationship. The partnership between Turner's WCW and the NWA was, to put it mildly, awkward. It was a marriage of convenience that was doomed from the start. WCW was a modern national company with one goal: crush the WWF. The NWA, at this point, was basically just a committee of small-time promoters with no national power. And yet, this board still technically held the ultimate authority over the main championship seen on WCW television. You can see the problem, right? WCW wanted total creative control. They wanted to pick their champion and write their stories without having to ask for permission from an outside committee. But the NWA board clung to its last shred of power. They insisted on approving any NWA world title changes. They argued that the champion should travel to their small, independent shows, just like in the old days. For a national TV company like WCW, that was ridiculous. It was a logistical nightmare and, frankly, beneath their top stars. The tension was obvious. To WCW executives, the NWA was a bureaucratic relic holding them back. To the NWA, WCW was a rogue member getting rich off the NWA's history without honoring its obligations. The NWA name still had value, but its governance was just a headache for WCW. The two were on a collision course. It was just a matter of when the crash would happen. The whole thing finally blew up in the late summer of 1993. Ric Flair was the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion again. He carried the big gold belt, which represented the championship and its lineage tracing all the way back to 1948. But WCW was already looking past Flair's reign. To save money, WCW would tape months of its syndicated shows, like WCW Worldwide, all at once. During a taping session that summer, they filmed a bunch of matches and angles that clearly showed ravishing Rick Rude as the new champion. The plan was simple. Flair would lose the title to Rude at the Fall Brawl pay-per-view in September. Well, word of this got back to the NWA board of directors, and they were livid. The problem wasn't just that the result was spoiled, it was the principle of the thing. WCW had decided on a title change and planned out its television for the next few months without even consulting them. It was a slap in the face. The board formally objected, demanding the final say. So, WCW had a choice. Throw out months of expensive TV tapings and bow down to a committee they felt was irrelevant, or finally cut the cord. For WCW, it wasn't a hard choice. In early September 1993, just weeks before Fall Brawl, WCW withdrew from the National Wrestling Alliance. This wasn't a clean break with a formal letter of resignation. It was a messy, hostile separation that would immediately swirl into public view. At Fall Brawl on September 19th, Ric Flair walked to the ring to face Rick Rude. But the ring announcer never said, NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. The NWA name was gone. The divorce was official. The aftermath was pure chaos. The NWA board, feeling completely betrayed, immediately threatened a lawsuit. They argued that since WCW had abandoned the alliance, they couldn't just keep using the championship's history and prestige. WCW, in turn, wiped the NWA name from all its broadcasts. This created a really weird problem. What was the title that Rude won from Flair? The physical belt, the beautiful 10-pound big gold belt, was owned by WCW. So when Rick Rude beat Flair at Fall Brawl, he was handed a championship that everyone recognized as the NWA title, but which legally couldn't be called that anymore. For a while, announcers just awkwardly called it the Big Gold Belt, or the World Heavyweight Championship. The most prestigious title in wrestling had suddenly become a championship with no name and a disputed history. It was a public identity crisis. Fans saw the same belt on the same wrestlers, but its entire history had seemingly been erased overnight. The lineage that gave the title its weight, the line of Thez, Race, and Flair, was now in limbo, caught in a legal battle. WCW needed to fix this, and their solution was a bit of creative corporate fiction. To give the big gold belt a new identity, they announced the creation of WCW International. On TV, this was presented as a new international governing body, a subsidiary of WCW. In reality, WCW International didn't exist. It was a clever branding trick to give the nameless title a legitimate-sounding name and sidestep the legal fight with the NWA. The big gold belt was officially renamed the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship. To make it all seem logical, WCW retroactively claimed that Flair's NWA reign had just magically turned into the inaugural WCW International Champion's reign at the moment of the split. So, Rick Rude didn't just win some nameless belt at Fall Brawl. He became the second WCW International Champion. It was complicated, sure, but it worked. It let WCW keep the iconic big gold belt on TV. And to give the international name some credibility, the title was defended in Japan for New Japan Pro Wrestling, adding to its prestige. For about 9 months, WCW had 2 world champions. Finally, in June 1994, WCW champion Ric Flair defeated WCW International champion Sting to unify the 2 titles, and the WCW International brand was quietly retired. So what happened to the NWA? Left without a champion, a belt, or a national TV deal, the alliance was a ghost. In a bid to regain some relevance, the NWA board decided to hold a tournament in August 1994 to crown a new champion. They partnered with a small, gritty promotion out of Philadelphia to host it, NWA Eastern Championship Wrestling. The NWA president, Dennis Coralluzzo, probably thought this was a great chance to restore tradition. He couldn't have been more wrong. The promotion was run by Todd Gordon and a young, creative genius named Paul Heyman. And Gordon and Heyman had zero interest in the NWA's dusty traditions. They saw the tournament as a golden opportunity, a platform to launch their own revolution. They cooked up a plan to use the NWA and its history as a sacrificial lamb. The plan revolved around the tournament's hand-picked winner, the franchise Shane Douglas. As scheduled, Douglas won the whole thing, becoming the new NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. NWA officials were in the ring, ready to hand him the title and give a speech. But then came one of the most infamous moments in wrestling history. Douglas took the mic and gave a tearful tribute to the great NWA champions of the past. But then, his tone changed. He declared that he refused to be a torchbearer for an organization that, in his words, had died 7 years ago. In an ultimate act of rebellion, he threw the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship belt to the ground. "They can all kiss my ass!" he yelled, grabbing his own promotion's ECW title and declaring it the one true World's Heavyweight Championship. The NWA board was publicly humiliated. They'd been used. Shortly after, Todd Gordon pulled his promotion from the NWA and renamed it. Eastern Championship Wrestling was dead. In its place rose Extreme Championship Wrestling. The NWA had tried to rebuild its legacy, only to have a new, edgier generation literally throw it in the dirt. This was more than just a backstage story. It was a moment that sent shockwaves through the entire industry. It's these moments, where the line between the on-screen show and the backroom business gets blurry, that make wrestling history so fascinating. If you want more deep dives into the moments that define the sport, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. And I want to know what you think in the comments. Who do you consider the last true NWA champion of the territory era? Let's be clear. The 1993 split wasn't a single event that killed the NWA. That system had been in decline for a decade, thanks mostly to the WWF's national expansion, suffocating the regional promotions that were the NWA's lifeblood. But WCW's departure was the symbolic end of an era. It was the moment the old, cooperative model of wrestling was officially made obsolete by the new reality of self-contained, corporate-owned brands. The split created the landscape for the rest of the 90s. 2 billionaire-backed giants, WWF and WCW, fighting for total domination. The NWA, the institution that had once been the most powerful force in the sport, was now pushed to the fringes. Its name and legacy were licensed out to independent promotions for years, with companies like TNA later borrowing the NWA name for a while to give themselves a sense of legitimacy before eventually casting it aside, just like WCW had. The story of WCW and the NWA is a corporate tale of ambition and the inevitable clash between the past and the future. It was a power struggle fought in boardrooms and courtrooms over who owned a legacy. WCW wanted to build its own empire, and it couldn't do that while still bowing to a fallen one. In severing that tie, WCW didn't just walk away from an alliance, it walked away from an entire era, leaving the once mighty National Wrestling Alliance to fade into wrestling history.